My name is Dr. Nicole Price, and Dr. Ian Roberts is the presenter today for the Daily Operational Plan of Excellence, the DOPE. And as always, one of our 7 strategies is celebration. And so we'd like to start today with you thinking of a time or an occasion when you made a decision, your specific leadership decision that averted a crisis or made the situation worse. And because we have such a small number of people on today, I'd love to either hear from you, or you could feel free to write in the chat what were the details of the situation and how you made it better or worse.
Remember, this is a judgment-free zone, so you know it's just part of learning. Yeah.
Let's see.
I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to see Dr. Roberts. I haven't seen him in a few years.
It's great to see you as well.
Yeah. Last week I had trouble getting on, so I was able to watch it later. But I'm just excited to be here, and I'm always inspired to hear Dr. Roberts' information. He was inspiring the St. Louis public. I'm now in Parkway School District, but I always learn a lot, and I'm just thankful to be here and to get some professional development.
Glad to have you.
And Jada, is Parkway in St. Louis?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm still waiting for some chats to come through. We'll keep the chat. I'll keep the chat open so that I can just make reference to it, if that's all right with you, Dr. Roberts, as we move on.
Absolutely, we can revisit that. So let's jump right to slide 3, so again, over 7 school leadership strategies. So we spent the first few webinars, over 30-minute sessions, where we talked about celebration, because of course we always start our sessions with celebration. And again, one of the reasons we emphasize the importance of celebration, and you all know this, right? I'm preaching to the choir. There's so much in the K-12 arena that we can complain about that is often challenging to us, pushes our thinking, but then there's also so much to celebrate. And those of us who are in positions of leadership especially, we have to continue to highlight and elevate celebratory moments so that we can inspire those to be leading. So we talked about celebration. We had a webinar where coaching was a topic. We talked about empathy and compassion last week. Our very first session, I think it was, we talked about engaging the community. And all of those sessions, you got snippets of these topic or subject matters, right? These are topics that can last for 4 to 6 hours in terms of going really deep. And so today I'm a little biased because the DOPE, and I always have to tell individuals, especially those that are still struggling with being culturally responsive, that DOPE essentially is just an acronym that means Daily Operational Plan of Excellence. And this is one of my favorites because it is the more tactical aspect of the work that we're doing. And so,
and Doc, you also mentioned to me that the DOPE is where you would almost start when you're in the middle of a crisis like COVID.
Absolutely, absolutely, because the DOPE provides, and later on in our time today, you'll see that the DOPE really provides you with really solid guidance. And I believe it gets you through any crisis, especially when you have more of a proactive approach. Yeah. So what is the DOPE? The DOPE, which was birthed, had its genesis more than 10 years ago, was a tool and a resource that was intended to get teams to really function at a very, very high level. It's really designed to assist not just the person leading a team or leading an organization or leading a school, but everyone who uses it, right? So what it does, it provides role clarity and clarity of impact. Every decision that we make, regardless of the size of the decision, has an impact on a person or on people. And some of these decisions may even have an impact on inanimate sort of things, such as maybe our system, the structure that we have in place. Those of us who are on the line today, I know that before your feet hits the ground every single morning, one of the first things we tend to do is to roll over and grab the phone. and we start to make decisions even before our feet hits the ground. And so we're constantly making decisions. And so what the dope does is, it's really a tool that allows teammates to not just make decisions, but to support each other. It builds on this adage that a chain is as strong as its weakest link. And so individuals who are maybe struggling with time management, struggling with adhering to the policies and practices and structures that we have in place for our team, once you have the dope in place, even those individuals who have a steep learning curve are likely to benefit from this tremendously. Additionally, the dope really encourages shared accountability amongst teammates, because everyone can look at the dope and see exactly who is responsible for what, role clarity, and two, where each person is supposed to be at any given moment during a meeting, at any given moment during the day, at any given moment during a particular crisis. When to use it, right? That's the question that often pops up. See, the daily use is something that we often over-index on. It allows us to really keep issues or even anticipate issues, but to keep them front and center based on the potential level of impact. One of the important things about the dope is that it should always be accessible to users. So the dope essentially should be no more than 2 pages. Unless you are leading an organization that is probably more than 500 people, and even then, the dope should be so succinct and high level that it should not exceed 2 pages. And essentially, it points out roles, responsibilities, as well as time for each minute and each hour of the day. The dope should be accessible to users at all times. And so what I've often suggested is that you should have an electronic copy of the dope, because again, most of us have smartphones, no judgment. Even if we have a flip phone, we want to be able to have access to the dope electronically at each moment of the day, so we know where everyone is. It actually reminds us of what is important, what is urgent, what is important but not urgent. And so it highlights, and the person creating the dope should highlight each of those things so that you know what decisions are mission critical at any given time of the day. The dope, in terms of its use, it should also, be allowed to build sort of muscle memory around the structures and systems that you all have put in place. And so when you have the dope, when you create the dope, this 2-pager, and we are willing to send you at the end of this call, once you reach out to us, probably an example of what a dope looks like. We are certainly ready to send that to you. It should actually allow you to not just build muscle memory, but how can you become sort of highly impactful and highly effective, working smarter as opposed to working harder. And remember, it's a living document. It should be tweaked over and over and over again. So case in point, if the dope that you've created with your team says that at the beginning of the school day, your assistant principal, your academic coach should be at the front entrance to greet parents. If you realize that after day 3, 90% of your parents are not going to the front entrance, but they're going to the back entrance because that works better for everyone involved, then you tweak the dope, right? Don't allow the dope to be a document that is so stagnant and you're not willing to make changes. Why use it? So as we think about, and we've spent a lot of time talking about the importance of being culturally responsive in our leadership. And if there's a document or a resource that you want to use to exhibit how culturally responsive you are and allow it to guide you, it's the dope. There are 4 points that I want to make around this, and then Dr. Price can feel free to chime in. And one is, you want to use the dope for decision-making, key decision-making, particularly in systems that are structurally oppressive and systemically oppressive. And most of us on the call work in some systems that are struggling with systemic oppression. 2, the dope should actually be used as a vehicle to drive your empathetic and compassionate approach to work. 3, it should be used to ensure that there's equitable practices and equitable decision-making. And then 4, it should be used as a great tool around communication and enrollment. Decision-making, and I'll go through these without getting too deep into them because of time, but remember at the end of this conversation, we'll share this with you. In terms of decision-making, you want to make sure that you understand and are cognizant of the fact that when you're making decisions, you're considering, 1, who's the person who's running point of this decision? You want to think of things like, one, what is the problem that you're trying to solve or prevent? What is the data or research that you have that helps you to define this problem? Did we switch? Can we, next slide, Doc. Sorry, next slide for us. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, what is the problem that we're trying to solve or prevent? What is the data or research and external factors that define the problem? One thing that comes up for me, and I want to use a real world example that some of you may relate to and that can resonate with you, and that is, let's say the problem on the table is parents visiting schools to visit their children during school hours. We know that parents' biggest investment is their children, and we never ever want to deny them having access to their children, but we also know how incredibly disruptive lots of parents coming up to the school during the instructional time can be to the work that we're doing. So if the problem at hand is parents visiting schools, we know that that's a problem we're trying to solve. What is the assessment of the current state? Something that comes up for me is parents who are coming to the school during the hours of day without an invitation, without an appointment, just to drop off lunch can become disruptive to the instructional program. And what is the desired outcome? And again, we want to think of things like the confidence level, the range of outcomes, opportunity cost. In this case, our desired outcome is to minimize the number of parents who are coming to the school and causing somewhat of a disruption or interruption to the daily operation of our schools and to the instructional program. The second is, after decision making, we want to think about equity, right? So, next slide, Doc. In terms of equity, and we know that equity comes up so often, especially now in contemporary K-12, the contemporary K-12 arena. When completing the DOPE, I want to encourage you to ask these questions, right? The decision that you're going to make, and again, it is said that school leaders on average make about 500 decisions a day, which is a lot. Who is affected by the decision you're making? Are they in the room? And if they're not in the room or at the table, why not? Case in point, if you're going to make the decision based on the scenario that I shared, parents visiting schools, what benefit is there to having at least one or two parents or a representative body of parents sitting at a table to get their input before you make that decision? It's always valuable. You always want to make sure that you have the people at the table who the decision will impact. What are the unintended consequences on the most marginalized constituents, right? In this case, we do not necessarily want to think of parents as being marginalized, but when you think of sort of the systemic oppressive structures in which we work, we know that we categorize English language learners, students with disabilities, and Black students as students who are historically marginalized. When you're making this decision, what impact is it going to have on those marginalized students? And thirdly, what are some of the technical and adaptive considerations that you must have in making these decisions, right? The technical, of course, we know are the decision points around, here's the decision. If you just have something in writing around a policy or a practice, it's likely to fix it. That's the more technical part of it, right? You have a problem, here's what we've done historically to fix it. The adaptive aspect of this is, how will people respond and react? Are parents likely to be offended? Are they likely to go to the school board? Are they likely to reach out to the superintendent? Will you have a parent or two who wants to come out there and call you out of your name? You have to consider with your team both the technical and adaptive aspects of your decision making. You know, there's a Senegalese proverb that says, if you're going to cut a man or a woman's hair, you should make sure that they're in the room. Essentially, it translates to, if you're going to make a decision that really changes the appearance or have an impact on someone, make sure that they are part of the conversation, right? So that Senegalese proverb always resonates with me.
You know, one thing that I like to make sure that people think about when it relates to parents is, are we considering all parents? I know in some districts we have some parents who are there, who do participate, who do pick things up for their children, who are involved. But how do we make sure that there's not a negative impact on kiddos who, you know, of no fault of their own, have parents who are not as engaged? And how can we make sure that we consider how we can support those children as well?
Absolutely. And I think with the scenario that I just presented, certainly varies based on grade level band. So you're likely to have much more parental involvement in K through 3 or K through 5. And we start to see less of that involvement in the higher grades, but the approach is still important. As you think about decision making with the DOPE, think of it from an equity standpoint. Communication and enrollment. So some additional questions that inform the content of the DOPE will include sort of key tactical considerations like who owns the problem or is closest to the problem. So if we want to use the same scenario of parents coming up to the school, which one of your staff members, a coach, an assistant principal, or a dean, has the responsibility of engaging with parents? And so you want to have role clarity. Remember earlier we talked about clarity of role and responsibilities. Who owns the problem? Who's driving the process? You want to make sure that that is clearly outlined in the DOPE as well. Have you considered a cross-functional impact, right, for cross-functional teams? In addition to, let's say, the administrative team or executive team, will this also have an impact on the special education department? Will it have an impact on the school security officers or school police officers? Will this also have an impact on related service providers, such as our counselors, such as our psychologists? You always want to consider, as you're creating the DOPE, having people at the table because you want to consider the cross-functional impact. And finally, when you think of communication and enrollment, because you want, again, enroll people who will be impacted by this, are you seeking input that is valuable from those that are impacted? And again, as you're thinking about creating your DOPE, is this a top-down decision that you want to make? And we always advise against that. Is this a decision that the principal and assistant principal are just going to huddle around and make independently? The caveat is this: yes, there are decisions oftentimes that will have to be made when only the principal and assistant principals and deans are going to make that decision. But when we think of using the DOPE from an equity standpoint, consider having individuals who will be impacted by this decision to sit at the table, or at least to have voice.
And at what grade level do you believe that children should be involved when they are in the impacted group?
And so it varies, because I think some of us may have the desire to even involve a grade level as low as 5th grades, because again, we believe that students sometimes even in the 3rd or 4th grade can have valuable input. But from a more practical standpoint, I would say that we should make lots of decisions for elementary school students, especially those in K3. And 4th and 5th grade and up, it would not harm or hurt you if you're making a decision that is grounded in your DOPE that will impact children. It's okay to have some of the more precocious 4th graders or 5th graders come and sit at the table and simply ask them, share with them what the scenario is. Case in point, one that impacts students is, let's say, recess. If you want to talk about recess, it would not hurt to bring 2 4th graders or 3 4th graders or 5th graders to the table and says, what do you all think about the current recess time? Should we change it? Here's what we're thinking about doing. Why and why not? Get their input and value their input, regardless of what decision you ultimately make. At the high school level, however, middle and high school, you often have student councils, student bodies that are very sort of vociferous and outspoken. And so, yes, you absolutely should have them at the table or representation at the table when you're making decisions about your DOPE. Empathetic leadership, right? Why is it important? Ultimately, the daily operation plan of excellence is just another tool, another resource that is used to help you to get from where you currently are in terms of your operations, in terms of how effective you are as a team, to the place that you desire to get to, which is to be a high functioning team that is incredibly effective. And even as you're creating your DOPE, the 3 sort of tenets that we always ground most of these 7 strategies in is you want to make sure that people who are involved in executing this, and that is internally your teammates, teachers, related service providers, you want to make sure that they're feeling seen, heard, and supported, but also external stakeholders. You want to also make sure that they're feeling seen, heard, and supported. One of the biggest benefits to the DOPE is to the leader. It makes your job so much easier because you have a resource or a document that everyone becomes conversant with, and they understand the importance of following this to a T with very little deviation. In terms of just the common challenge is, right, and that is, how do I have time to visit this every single day? It's one of the things that pops up for us. Time and consistency. How do I have time to visit with this every day? Our answer is very simple. What we share, the 4 areas that we shared around decision making, equity, communication, and enrollment, we're going to share that document with you. So again, at the end of our conversation, reach out to us and we'll make sure that you have the one page that you can refer to. But the biggest challenges we have is people believe that at any given moment during the day, if something else calls them, they should respond to that and deviate from everything that we've talked about and planned for in the dope. So consistency will become a challenge. You have to work through this and understand that people are not going to become conversant with the dope in the first or the second week or the first time you implement it. And time, you have to make the time, and making the time to dictate, what is the best use of time as you think about how you effectively implementing the dope.
I wanted to share that in the chat because I know you're not observing it. We had Deshonda say that unfortunately there was a shooting in front of her school and the shooter was trying to gain access to the building. This occurred shortly after dismissal, and already having the dope in place literally saved the lives of students and staff there in the building.
Thank you for sharing that. Yes, a lot of our St. Louis Public School leaders, they have been exposed to the dope because, of course, I sort of insisted and threw it at them as a resource to use. So it's good to see that you all are using the dope or something like it. Again, thank you for sharing that, Deshaun. It speaks to the fact that effectively implementing the dope can be life-saving and life-changing. Wow, that's not a good one to share. Anything else in the chat to share?
No, but I do have a couple questions for you. So when you do have the urgent getting in the way of the important, we know what that looks like in leadership in general. What's been some of the ways in which you've helped to be able to manage some of the urgencies that come up just in the daily leadership practices?
And thank you for that question. It's an excellent question. Here's what comes to mind for me. There's the urgent and then there's the false urgent. And let me address the false urgent. There's this interesting dichotomous relationship between what happens in schools and what happens at the district office. So oftentimes, what is deemed to be urgent usually comes from the district office, right? The place where I work. And it's not that important to the operation of school at the moment. And it's incredibly frustrating to school leaders, principals, assistant principals, and their teams when the district office says, this is urgent, and the people in the school building are saying, it's not as important right now. We have testing that we're dealing with right now. We have 5 teachers who are absent. We have subs that are acting like they have no sense. We just had a shooting in the community. So what I often say is, again, and I encourage school leaders to challenge the process, just decide what is important or what is defined as urgent based on the needs of the school, and most importantly, based on the needs of the people who are immediately impacted, students and adults in the building.
Mm-hmm. And then one final question, your dope is scheduled to the minute?
My dope has always been scheduled to the minute. That creates an anxiety to individuals who have a different leadership orientation because they want to have more flexibility, which is why I said it's a living document. I schedule the dope to the minute because it impacts those individuals who are struggling with the consistency. So I've had some deans, for example, who are never where they're supposed to be. And so the reason that I schedule it to the minute is you can either check in on the radio or check in via text every once in a while to say, Dean Thomas, for example, I just left the 5th floor. You're scheduled to be on the 5th floor between 10 and 10:30. It's now 10:05. What's your location? Not in a punitive way, but you're constantly checking on people, especially during the first 30 days of the dope, so that they start to build muscle memory. The dope is broken down, the one that you use for operations during the day, to the very minute.